Welcome to Literary Speak, a forum where readers, writers, and artists meet to promote a love of reading, writing, literacy, and the arts. I'm C. Deborah Thomas, your host for the next half hour. And with me today, again, is Anthony Sykes, and we're going to talk about tax issues as they relate to starting a business. Anthony, welcome back to Literary Speak.
Thank you, Deborah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You remind me of a client that I've been working with, and we've gone a long way, and it's going. And part of what I'm going to talk about is how we went from zero to the top of their game. So
that's what we want
to
hear.
What I want to cover today is in this economy, a lot of small businesses get started because people can't find a job. They're unemployed, and you have two choices. You either go to school or you create your own business. Now, mine was a little different, but I've made a lot of mistakes along the way that I'm hoping to help your audience avoid.
Good.
A lot of people wake up with what I call an entrepreneurial fit. They say, well, I can do it better than this guy, and I'm going to do it better than him, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So what I'd like to do is cover a series of thoughts that people should go through, steps that they should go through. And the first is, am I prepared to spend the time, the money, the resources needed to get this business started? I had a client. They were an individual, and they decided to start a business. What they hadn't thought about was how much that business was going to cost. They wanted to create a retail store, a women's clothing store. That's one of the easiest to start, one of the most expensive to start, obviously because you have to buy the product. But also, as you well know, women's fashions come in and they go out very quickly. And what they did was they bought a lot of last year's fashions, and they were trying to promote themselves as a boutique, and it didn't go over well. So they lasted as long as they didn't even last the least. So what you must do is be prepared. You must have the money, and we're going to cover some others. And another is, what kind of business do you want? And that sounds kind of interesting, but you may be a secretary in an office or an administrator, and you say, I want to start my own business. Well, what is that business? What would you like to do? How would you like spending 10, 12 hours a day doing this? Do you love what you do? Can you wake up in the morning doing this, go to bed at night thinking about doing this? If you can, now you need to write down that business.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit to that whole idea of how much startup money you need, because if you've lost your job, most people don't have that 6 months of income that they recommend. So let's face it. So you really don't have any money. I've heard people say they had a credit card, which I don't know about that so much, but it's worked for some people.
Right.
So is it better to start a business that doesn't require a lot of startup? When I started a business because I was out of work, I didn't have any money either, but I wrote a book, which is a product that required like $5,000. I ended up finding a guy who was willing to do the printing for me until I sold my books, until I got famous.
Right.
So is that an option for people to kind of look for somebody who is willing to say, I know you don't have any money, but I believe in your product. Here's what we can do.
That's an option. And when I say you need to have the money and the resources, again, you need to know how much money you have. If you have no money in reserve and you want to start a business, then maybe you should think about this is not the right time. Or then maybe you should think about bringing in investors. Or partners. And that's another way of finding finance. Once you have that out, that's why starting a business is planning. You know how much money you have in the bank. You know what your bills are. So now you need to know, okay, what is this going to cost? When you have kind of decided this is what I'm going to do. I have an idea of what it's going to cost me. What product or services are you going to offer? My client, they wanted to have everything. And this is that retail store. They wanted to be a mini Walmart.
Oh, wow.
Well,
ambitious.
think about it. Average Walmart store is about 50,000 square feet. They wanted to do it within 600. That didn't happen. It took me about 3-4 days to convince them this is not going to happen. Pick 3 or 4 things you want to sell in women's clothing. They wanted to sell women's clothing, men's clothing, baby clothing. They said that's not going to happen. You can't have enough. So you pick 3 or 4 things in different sizes for women, and that's going to be your store. Men, you have to leave out. Babies, you better leave out. So we finally got to that agreement, and finally they opened their door, and they're doing okay. They're doing okay.
That's good.
Now, when you have that entrepreneurial fit, you need to ask yourself, why am I starting this business? Am I starting it because I want to make money, because I want to make the world a better place, because I think my boss is a dummy and I can do it better than him? You know,
all of the above.
All of the above is okay. But again, you ought to know what your boss is doing and not in a bad sort of way. But a lot of my clients, when they started up, were managers. And the manager doesn't have to worry about payroll.
A lot of things,
Where does the payroll come from? They don't have to worry about marketing in terms of where do we get the clients from. So they had part of the pie. They didn't realize how much of that pie they didn't have. So you need to think about that.
That's a really important point that you may want to elaborate on a bit, because a lot of times people just see that one little frame and they don't get that there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes with it. And then they go into business and they think, well, I didn't know I have to do this. I didn't know I have to do that. It's like my backdrop here. It starts from that whole process. You know, you have the nights when you're up kind of taking a drink, having some coffee, blah, 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 you know. Then you get this light bulb moment and you go through the process to the publication. People only see one sliver of those in their initial, and then they get stymied.
That's correct.
So elaborate on that a bit more. Reiterate it, because people miss that. I'm sure you meet a lot of people who do.
98% of the startup businesses I work with, and we work with a lot of startup businesses, they don't understand. You are no longer an employee. You are an officer of your business. You need to treat it as that. Your job is to not do the work. It is to get other people to do the work. Your job is to look forward, to oversee, to project for the future. And if you can do that, then your business will succeed. If you don't, your business will not. Even if you're just a sole proprietor, a one-person business, you still need to do all those functions. Because as an employee, when I was an employee, the last job I had, I was a tax analyst. So they provided me with the books. I could go online and look at it. I knew what sections of the law I had to look up and everything else. Well, now I have my own business. So a client comes in, I have to interview. I didn't need interview skills as an analyst. I was in my own room and I had this and I just did my own thing. Well, I have to judge that personality. I have to see and kind of foresee what they're going to do. And in my own business, I have to foresee what the economy is going to look like so I can make sure that I can make my own payroll. So it's a lot of other things in there. So if they can't do that, if they're unwilling to do that, then they really shouldn't go into business for themselves. And from that, now you need to understand what the target market is. Who is your client? When I first started business as a tax preparer, that's how I first got in. I said, well, anybody who needs their taxes done. Not necessarily the best way to go.